Have you ever known someone to fall just short of their greatness because they were afraid of the crowd and what they may think or what they may do? In today's story, a man named Bartimaeus was challenged with the same situation yet overcame that temptation. There's three things that stood out to me in how he did that made the Messiah stand still as well. What can we learn from his example when we're challenged with the crowd? He did it despite the crowd. He did it anyway on today's All In. In Mark chapter 10, we have a blind man named Bartimaeus who overcame the crowd. Now, the crowd seems simple. Most of us like to use the phrase, I don't really care about what you say, and it doesn't matter what everybody else do, but it does matter, and it's a challenge for many of us. How do you overcome that? Again, I like to go back to what did he do that caused the Messiah to stand still when he overcame the crowd's temptation, challenging him to be quiet. Let's pick up in Mark chapter 10, verse 46. It reads, "Now they came to Jericho. As he went out of Jericho with his disciples, a great multitude, blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, sat by the road begging. And when he heard that it was Issue of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, Yeshua, son of David, have mercy on me. Then many warned him to be quiet. But he cried out all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. So Yeshua stood still and commanded him to be called. Then they called the blind man, saying to him, Be of good cheer, rise, he is calling you. And throwing aside his garment, he rose and came to Yeshua. So Yeshua answered him and said to him, What do you want me to do for you? The blind man said to him, Rabboni, that I may receive my sight. Then Yeshua said to him, Go your way. Your faith has made you well. And immediately he received his sight and followed Yeshua on the road. What a beautiful, wonderful story. I'm going to be honest, guys. When I was looking at this passage, it is so packed. I had to trim it down. I said, look, what is one thing I can focus on here? Because there's so much good stuff. Really just two verses I want to look at in verses 47 and 48. But man, there's so much to talk about here. We can make probably 2 or 3 lessons on. The crowd stood out to me. What was it that allowed this man to overcome the crowd? What did he do that you and I can learn from? Let's go back to the passage and see what we can pick up. In verse 47 it says, And when he heard that it was Yeshua, and you guys hear me say Yeshua a lot. That's his Hebrew name. Jesus is a name that came about later. So that's why I continue to say that name. That's his name his mother called him. He said when he heard that it was Yeshua. And I paused there because, yes, the scripture says when he heard. Why does it say when he heard? Because he had no other choice but to hear. You see, he was blind. And he couldn't use his other faculties. He couldn't use his eyes. He couldn't use his hands. He couldn't just walk about and go up to the Messiah and say, Hey, excuse me, can I ask you a question? Let me tell you something. All he could do was hear. All this man could do was listen in as to what the crowds were saying and to the voices. But he used what he got. Look, that's the first thing that jumped out to me here, is that he heard him, and that was enough for him. Look, he could have said, look, I can't even see the man. Here's another time where things are passing by, and I have a good excuse. I can't see him. No, that wasn't enough. He says, I hear him, and when he get in voice shot of me, when I can get him in voice shot, I'm going to use what I got because I do have my voice. Yeah, I do have my voice. That wasn't taken away from me, so I'm going to cry out. Look, he heard and used that. Look, all the things that I imagine all the things he heard. If you know a blind person or have been around a blind person or familiar with that lifestyle, you understand that their hearing is more sensitive. Can you imagine all the things he heard, all the gossip, all the people who promised to do this and that, all the steps that he got used to hearing, the way a coin sounds in a cup, he can hear. He's used to hearing a lot of things. But the one point I want you to get here is that he was able to filter out all the noise, all the unnecessary glittering, glamour, and all the stuff. And he says, I hear Yeshua the Messiah. Look, do you hear him? Are you listening for him? Or are you following what's popular, what's loud, what's shining, what's trending, what's common? What's easy to steal your attention away? Look, social media, games, movies, everything is buzzing around you, the billboards, and everything's vying for your attention. But he was listening for one thing. He heard the Master. He heard the Messiah. Look, I'm convinced that some of us are letting him pass by because we are not listening and hearing for him. Listen for him. He's speaking through your co-workers, through your family, through his word, through the songs, through the meditation. He's speaking. But are you listening? See, he heard and he responded to that. The second thing that jumped out to me is in verse 47 and 48 as we continue reading. It says, and when he heard that it was Yeshua of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, Yeshua, son of David, have mercy on me. What's in that passage? Two things stood out to me. One, he called him the son of David. Well, who is that? Look, he's not the son of Joseph. No. He's not just a normal man. He's of royal lineage. I'm going to approach him as son of David. I'm the son of Bartimaeus, a simple man. My name even means in some translations, son of filth. But you're the son of David, of royalty. You're able, it's possible with you. Nothing is limited with you. Look at that. He says, first of all, you're awesome. You're at the top. I give you worship and praise just in the way I mention your name. But right after that, what does he say? Have mercy. Mercy. Wow, what is mercy? Well, who needs mercy? The only people who need mercy are the people who are at fault. If you've done something, if you sinned, if you transgressed, however you want to put it, you need mercy. What is mercy? Mercy is saying, please give me a lighter sentence than what I deserve. So in that sentence alone, he's admitting that you're awesome. You're great. I am a sinner in need of your mercy, in need of your forgiveness. I've sinned. How many of us are so bold and so desperate in our faith and so desperate for a healing that openly will say, look, this is where I've wronged. This is where I've sinned. And this is exactly what this man is doing. So despite the crowds, he heard him anyway. Despite the crowds, he was vulnerable. He was vulnerable. Will you be vulnerable and be open to the point to say, I don't care. I hear him close enough. I'm going to yell and I want his mercy. So I'm going to ask for it because I'm a sinner and I need it. That's the thing that points out to me. You know, it reminds me of a story with David and Samuel where he was vulnerable in his relationship with God. Let's pick up in 2 Samuel chapter 6, this story where David, the ark was coming back and he was excited. It says, then David danced before Yahweh with all his might. Look, I can stop there. David danced with Yahweh with all his might. How many of us would dance before God with all their might? Just yes, yeah, whatever it is. Many of us will not do that, especially in public places, even in a place of worship. Why? Because what will the crowds do? But he didn't care. All his might he was dancing. Let's read on. And David was wearing a linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of Yahweh with shouting and with the sound of the trumpet. Now as the ark of Yahweh came into the city of David, Michal, Saul's daughter, looked through a window and saw King David leaping and whirling before Yahweh, and she despised him in her heart. What did she say she saw David doing? leaping and whirling, jumping in the air. That sounds like some ballerina stuff. A grown man in front of all these people, leaping up in the air and swirl. You don't have to do that. Yeah, I can already hear it right now in my own self and other people looking. You don't have to do all of that. That's unnecessary. That's ridiculous. Yeah, I know. It's not about what I have to do. It's about what we get to do. And this man was crying out saying, have mercy. I don't care what people think. David was jumping up and swirling. I don't care. I'm excited. The question is, will you be vulnerable? See, when you're vulnerable to the point when you're so desperate that you want his blessings, you will be vulnerable. I could care less about what you think of me because I just want the Messiah so badly. You know, the last thing that stood out to me was how they responded to his crying out. In verse 48 it says, then many warned him to do what? Be quiet. They said, be quiet. Shut up. I don't even like to use that word. Keep it down. Be quiet. But that's not all they said. It says they warned him. There were some words here that they didn't include here. They were warning him. What's a warning? A warning is saying, look, you need to do this because if you don't, this will happen. They were warning this man. He was blind. All he could do was scream out. And yet they were telling him to shush. This was the opportunity of a lifetime that was passing him by, and they told him to be quiet. And guys, my goodness, many of us have been quiet. Somebody has told you to be quiet. Stop it. Just with a look, just with a few words, they said, that's ridiculous. That's silly. Why would you do that? Don't do that anymore. People have threatened you, threatened me, saying, I will start to look at you as if you're weird if you don't stop. And that's enough to turn off a lot of people. I've seen it in myself. I've seen it in friends of mine. Even though they would stop following the truth, what they believe, because people will ostracize them or call them weird and not include them in the circle. I warn you, if you don't stop, I'm going to think you weird and I'm not going to treat you the same. You're going to be out of our circle. That sounds like some elementary stuff, but this happens as adults. You will get warned not just with our friends, not even at church, even in our worship areas. We don't want to fully give him worship because we're afraid of the crowds. At work, if you keep doing that, you might get fired. In a relationship, whether you're married or otherwise, if you don't stop being so crazy for God, like we saw with David, I'm going to pull my heart back from you, separate myself from you, whatever it is. That will happen. Will you submit? Or will you say, it doesn't matter. I love him so much, I'm giving everything I got. Will you do that? Will you do that with your friends? Will you do that with your coworkers, with your church members? Here's another one. Satan throws a lot of stuff at you. You could get hurt. You could get sick. You could even die. Look, guys, let me close up here by saying in James chapter 4, verse 8, it says, draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. If you are going to be serious today, serious this month, serious this year about drawing near to him, not just going through the motions, you're going to have to decide that I want him so badly that despite the crowds, despite what people say, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to raise my hands anyway. I'm going to fast anyway. I'm going to be holy as much as I can anyway. Although my wife or husband may say, what are you doing? Here you go again. Or whether your best friends will say, that's kind of weird. Why are you? It doesn't matter because he's looking at you. And I wonder with this man, was he looking at him the way he looked at the Syrophoenician woman who he called a dog? Remember that story? He actually heard the woman crying out and he ignored her. I wonder if he ignored this guy. I wonder if he heard him the first time and saw if he would say it again. I wonder if he hears you and wondering, do you want it bad enough that you would even be willing to embarrass yourself in front of the crowds? You would be willing to change yourself so much so that you don't look like everybody else, talk and dress and be like everybody else. I wonder if he's waiting for you in the same way. Draw near to him and he would draw near to you. Look, as you can see, guys, if we're going to go all in with the Messiah, it's going to call us to forget about the crowds, forget what people are saying, and fully embrace his call because we want him. I love you guys. Until next time, despite the crowds, do it anyway. Amen.